The little boy was not breathing. Amelia Carter had just worked a 12-hour shift. Her feet ached. Her scrubs smelled like antiseptic and exhaustion. She had nothing left. But when she heard the crash, when she saw the burning SUV flipped sideways on the wet street and a child's small hand pressed against the cracked glass, every part of her body moved before her mind could stop it. She ran toward the fire while everyone else ran away. She did not know whose son he was. She was about to find out. If this story already has your heart pounding, subscribe to our channel, follow every part until the very end, and drop a comment telling us what city you're watching from. We want to see how far this story has traveled. The rain had been falling for 3 hours without stopping when the accident happened. It was the kind of rain that turned New York City into something unrecognizable, the streets slick and black, the headlights of passing cars smearing into long, blurry ribbons. The people hunched under awnings and pressed against doorways, waiting for a break that never came. It was the kind of night that made people walk faster, keep their heads down, and decide very quickly that whatever was happening on the other side of the street was someone else's problem. Amelia Carter was not that kind of person. She had never been that kind of person, even though life had given her plenty of reasons to become one. She was 34 years old. She had worked in the emergency room of St. Matthew's Hospital for 9 years. She had held the hands of people taking their last breaths. She had talked parents through the worst moments of their lives. She had worked double shifts so often that the overnight security guard knew her coffee order. She was tired in the way that only people who give everything every single day understand, not just tired in her body, but tired in her soul, in the quiet place behind her eyes where hope used to feel easy. But she was still walking home instead of taking a cab because she was 3 weeks behind on rent and had stopped buying herself small comforts months ago. She heard the crash before she saw it. It was enormous, a sound like the world splitting open. Metal shrieking against metal, glass exploding, and then a terrible silence that lasted exactly 1 second before the screaming started. Amelia turned. Half a block ahead of her, an SUV had been struck from the side by a vehicle that had already vanished into the rain. The impact had flipped the SUV onto its side. It was a big vehicle, black, expensive, the kind of vehicle that people with serious money drove. The front was crumpled against a parked car. Smoke was rising from the engine. And then, before she could take another breath, a thin tongue of orange flame appeared beneath the hood. The crowd that had gathered on the sidewalk stepped back in one collective movement, like a single organism responding to a threat. Amelia stepped forward. She was already running before she had formed a conscious thought. Her bag dropped from her shoulder to the pavement. Her keys fell somewhere she didn't see. She was running toward the burning vehicle, with both hands already pulling off her jacket because she was going to need it, and her mind was already doing what 9 years in an emergency room had trained it to do: assessing, calculating, deciding. One occupant. Small. Backseat child. She could see the small hand against the window. The fingers were not moving. Call 911. She screamed over her shoulder without slowing down. Call right now. Tell them there's a child. She didn't wait to see if anyone listened. The driver's side door was facing up toward the rain. She climbed onto the side of the vehicle, felt the hot metal against her palms, ignored it. She grabbed the door handle. Locked. She looked through the cracked glass and saw him, a boy, maybe 6 or 7 years old, dark-haired, still buckled into his car seat. His head was dropped to one side. His eyes were closed. The fire under the hood was growing. Hey, she banged on the window. Can you hear me? Baby, can you hear me? Nothing. She looked around for something, anything. A man near the curb was holding an umbrella with a heavy wooden handle. She didn't ask. She grabbed it from his hand, turned it around, and drove the handle into the corner of the window with everything she had. The glass spiderwebbed. She hit it again. It gave way. She reached inside, ignoring the edges of broken glass cutting into her arm, and found the seatbelt release. The buckle clicked. She got both hands under the boy's arms and pulled. He was heavier than he looked, and the angle was wrong, and her feet kept slipping on the wet metal. but she pulled and pulled until he came free and she staggered backward off the side of the vehicle and went down hard onto one knee on the pavement. She managed to keep his head from hitting the ground. She maneuvered him flat, tilted his chin up, and pressed 2 fingers to the side of his neck. Pulse, weak, irregular. She tilted his head back. She pinched his nose. She gave 2 rescue breaths. She started compressions, one hand on top of the other, the heel of her palm pressing down on that tiny chest. 30 compressions, counting under her breath, then 2 more breaths, then 30 more compressions, then 2 more breaths. The rhythm automatic after years of practice, her eyes locked on the boy's face, watching for any change. The crowd had gone completely silent. "Come on," she said quietly. "Come on, baby, I've got you. You're safe. Come on." 20 compressions. 25, 30. She breathed into him again. He coughed. It was a small sound, thin and wet and barely there, but it was the most beautiful sound Amelia had ever heard in her life. The boy gasped. His eyes fluttered. His chest began to rise and fall on its own. The crowd erupted. Someone cheered. Someone was crying. A woman behind Amelia was praying in Spanish. A man was filming on his phone. The ambulance siren was finally audible in the distance, wailing through the rain-soaked streets. Amelia pressed her hand against the boy's chest and kept counting his breaths. "Good," she whispered. "Good. Just breathe. That's all you have to do. Just breathe." The boy's eyes opened fully for the first time. They were dark eyes, very dark, almost black, and even in shock and confusion they were striking. He looked up at her, and she could see him trying to understand where he was and who she was and what had happened. Children in shock had a particular way of looking at you, not frightened, exactly, but concentrated, as if their whole being were focused on a single point. "Hey," Amelia said softly. "Hi, I've got you. You're okay. What's your name?" The boy's mouth moved. "Lucas," he whispered. "Hi, Lucas. I'm Amelia. I'm a nurse. You had an accident, but you're safe now. Can you feel your hands and feet?" He tried to move his fingers. Nodded slowly. "Good boy. You're doing so well. Just stay still for me, okay? The ambulance is almost here." She felt someone step close behind her before she heard them, a presence, large and immediate, that changed the temperature of the air around her. She turned. The black SUVs had arrived in total silence. She hadn't heard them. She hadn't noticed them. But they were there, 4 of them, arranged in a half-circle behind the crowd, and the crowd had parted automatically, without being asked, in the way that people part for things they instinctively understand are dangerous. The men who stepped out were not police. They were not paramedics. They wore suits, dark, expensive, cut precisely, and they moved with the kind of controlled deliberateness that only came from training, discipline, and experience. They fanned out without speaking. 2 of them posted themselves at the ends of the block. 2 more moved through the crowd, and people stepped back without being touched. And then, through the space they created, 1 man walked toward her. He was tall, over 6 feet, with broad shoulders and dark hair gone slightly silver at the temples. He was wearing a charcoal suit with no tie, and despite the rain, he moved without hurrying. His face was extraordinary, not handsome in the ordinary sense, but striking, defined, with a jaw like something carved and eyes so dark they seemed to pull in light rather than reflect it. He was the kind of man who walked into rooms and made other men straighten their spines without meaning to. He stopped 3 feet from where Amelia was kneeling over the boy. His eyes dropped to Lucas, and for one moment, just one, every wall he carried visibly cracked. It lasted less than a second. Then the walls came back up, harder than before. He crouched down beside her, and his voice, when he spoke, was low and controlled, and very, very cold. "Who saved my son?" One of the suits behind him pointed at Amelia. "She did, sir." The dark eyes moved to her face. Amelia met them without looking away. She had spent 9 years making eye contact with people who were frightened, and people who were dangerous, and people who were both, and she had learned something important in that time. Looking away was always a mistake. "He was unconscious when I reached him," she said, keeping her voice level. "Pulse was present but irregular. I performed CPR. He's breathing on his own now, but he needs to be evaluated." He may have internal injuries from the impact. He needs a hospital. Tonight. The man's eyes stayed on her face for a moment that felt much longer than it was. Your name, he said. Amelia Carter. I'm an emergency room nurse at St. Matthew's. You broke the window. The door was locked. You cut your arm. She looked down. She hadn't felt it, but there was a long, shallow cut along her forearm where the broken glass had caught her. Blood had mixed with rainwater and run thin and pink down to her wrist. It's fine, she said. It is not fine. It's fine, she repeated and turned back to Lucas. There was a fractional pause, and then, to Amelia's complete surprise, the man almost smiled. It didn't reach his eyes, and it was gone immediately, but it had been there. Mr. Romano, one of the suited men, materialized at his shoulder. We need to move. Romano. The name moved through the crowd like a current. Amelia caught the ripple of it in the faces around her, the sudden alertness, the way the nearest bystanders subtly increased the distance between themselves and the scene. Even the man with the phone stopped filming. The man Romano stood and lifted Lucas with a tenderness that was completely at odds with everything else about him. The boy's head rested against his shoulder. Lucas's hand found his father's lapel and gripped it. Romano turned to his men. Bring her. Two of the suited men stepped toward Amelia. She stood up. Excuse me. You are the only witness, Romano said without turning around. The ambulance is 30 seconds away. They will not be needed. He is a child who just survived cardiac arrest. He absolutely needs. My physician is already at my residence. He is far better equipped than any hospital in this city. He paused. You will come and finish your assessment. You will be compensated for your time. And then you will be free to go. Amelia opened her mouth. She closed it. She looked at Lucas, limp and pale against his father's shoulder. She looked at the two men, waiting with their hands folded in front of them, not touching her, not threatening her, simply waiting with the absolute certainty that she would make the correct choice. She picked up her bag from the pavement. Fine, she said. But I need my kit. Nobody moved for a moment. Then Romano said simply get her whatever she needs. The Romano estate was 40 minutes outside the city. Amelia knew they were leaving Manhattan because she tracked the bridges, but after that she lost the thread of where they were going. The windows of the SUV were tinted to near black. She was in the back seat with Lucas, monitoring his breathing, checking his pupils every few minutes with the penlight she kept in her bag. A second vehicle traveled in front of them, a third behind. She was not afraid. She told herself this several times, and mostly she believed it. Lucas had fallen into a light sleep. His color was coming back. His breathing was slow and even. She kept her fingers loosely around his small wrist, counting his pulse. Romano was in the front seat. He hadn't spoken since they left the city. He was on his phone, his voice low, conducting what seemed to be multiple simultaneous conversations in at least 2 languages. She caught fragments Italian, she thought, or something like it, but she couldn't follow it. She focused on the boy. When they arrived, the gate was iron, and the driveway was long. She didn't try to catalog what she saw. She was not interested in being impressed. She was interested in getting the child into a proper examination and then getting home. She had work at 7 the next morning. A man who introduced himself as Dr. Petrov met them at the door. He was 50s, precise, clearly very good at his job. He and Amelia exchanged clinical information in the efficient shorthand that medical professionals used, and she was reassured by his competence. Together, they moved Lucas to a room that had been set up with what she privately admitted was better equipment than half the private clinics she'd ever seen. She completed her assessment. Dr. Petrov confirmed her findings. Lucas was stable. He needed rest, monitoring, and a follow-up scan in the morning. When they came back out into the hallway, Romano was waiting. He had changed his jacket. His hands were at his sides. He was standing very still in the way that physically powerful people stood when they were working hard not to show what they were feeling. He is stable, she said. His vital signs are good. His pupils are equal and reactive. I would want a head CT in the morning to rule out any slow bleeds, but Dr. Petrov agrees with my assessment. He should sleep. He's going to be scared when he wakes up, so whoever is with him should be calm and familiar. He needs to see your face. Romano absorbed this in silence. Thank you, he said. It was simple. No performance to it. Just 2 words said plainly, meaning exactly what they meant. Of course, she said. Now someone can drive me back to the city, or I can arrange for a car. I have to be at the hospital at 7. You will stay tonight. She blinked. I'm sorry? Lucas may wake frightened. He knows your face now. He paused. I would like him to have access to you through the night. Mr. Romano, with all due respect, you saved his life. There was no emotion in his voice. It was a statement of fact. The least I can do is offer you a room for 1 night. She looked at him for a moment. 1 night, she said. He nodded once. And someone wakes me if anything changes with his breathing. Agreed. She was shown to a room that was larger than her entire apartment. She sat on the edge of the bed without taking off her shoes and took out her phone and called her friend Dana, who was also a nurse, and who was the only person whose number she could dial at midnight without feeling guilty about it. I need you to know where I am, she said, and gave as much detail as she could. Dana was quiet for a moment. Romano, Dana said. Amelia. Do you know who that is? I'm beginning to understand. He runs half the city. Not politically, not legally. I gathered that. Are you safe? Amelia looked around the room. Through the window, she could see the lights of what appeared to be a significant security perimeter. She had not been threatened. She had not been locked in. Her phone was working. I think so, she said. You think so? I'll call you at 6. You had better, Dana said. Or I'm calling literally everyone. Amelia almost smiled. Good night, Dana. She hung up and sat in the silence for a moment. Then she heard it faint, down the hall. A small voice, still rough with sleep and shock, saying 1 word over and over. Papa. Papa. And then, clearly, unmistakably, even through the walls, Romano's voice. Low and steady, the words she couldn't make out. But the tone was something she recognized. She had heard it 1,000 times in the hospital. It was the voice of a parent trying to hold themselves together for a child. She set her phone on the nightstand and lay down on top of the covers and stared at the ceiling. She thought about the crash. The shape of it bothered her. She had worked long enough in emergency medicine to understand accidents, the mechanics of them, the random brutal physics. And the impact that had flipped that SUV had not been random. She had seen it, just for a moment in the second before she focused entirely on Lucas. The vehicle that struck them had come from a side street with too much speed and too much precision. It had hit at exactly the right angle. That was not an accident. She closed her eyes. She told herself it was not her problem. She told herself she had done her job, and now she was going to sleep 4 hours. And then she was going home, and this would become one of those extraordinary nights she would tell Dana about for years. She almost believed it. But somewhere in the house, a child was saying, Papa, and his father was answering in a voice stripped of every defense. And Amelia Carter lay in the dark and knew with the same quiet certainty that had made her run toward the fire when everyone else ran away that she was not going to walk out of this house and leave it alone. Not yet. Not until she understood what had really happened on that street tonight. And not until she was sure that little boy was going to be safe. Amelia woke at 5:40 in the morning to the sound of raised voices. Not loud, these were men trained to keep their volume controlled, even when they were furious, but the sharpness of it cut through the wall clearly enough. She sat up, already alert the way nurses learn to be alert, 0 to fully functional in under 3 seconds. She listened. 2 voices, one she recognized as Romano's. The other she didn't know. She couldn't make out words. But she could read tone, the way musicians read melody, and what she was hearing was not a disagreement. It was an accusation. She stood up, smoothed her clothes, she had slept in them, and stepped into the hallway. The voices were coming from behind a closed door at the far end. She did not walk toward them. Instead, she turned the other direction, toward Lucas's room, because that was the one thing in this house that was actually her business. The door was slightly open. She pushed it gently. Lucas was awake. He was sitting up in bed with his knees pulled to his chest, and he was staring at the window with the particular focused stillness of a child who has been awake for a while and has been trying very hard not to make any noise about it. When he heard her push the door open, he turned, and she saw the exact moment his face changed, from braced to relieved. "Hey," she said quietly, stepping inside. "How are you feeling?" "My chest hurts," he said. "Here." He pressed his small fingers to the center of his sternum, right where she had done compressions. "That's going to be sore for a few days. I was pushing on it pretty hard last night." "It means the medicine worked." She came and sat on the edge of the bed, the way she always sat with pediatric patients, not towering over them, not too far away. "You remember what happened?" Lucas was quiet for a moment. "The car crashed," he said. "Yes." "There was a lot of noise." "Yes." "And then I couldn't breathe." He looked at her carefully, the way children looked at you, when they were trying to decide whether to trust what they were about to say. "And then you were there." "I was there," she confirmed. He thought about this. "You fixed my breathing. I helped your breathing remember how to work on its own. Your body did most of it." I'm a nurse." Which is actually better in some situations. He almost smiled. It was a cautious almost smile, clearly a trait he had absorbed from his father. "How is it better?" "Doctors know a lot about medicine. Nurses know a lot about people. Sometimes when things go wrong, knowing about people is more useful." She checked his pulse the way she'd been doing through the night, just 2 fingers on his wrist, casual, so he wouldn't feel examined. "Strong and steady." "Good. Are you hungry?" "Yes." Then immediately, "Is my papa here?" "He's down the hall." Lucas nodded, and something in his shoulders dropped by about half an inch. "He gets loud sometimes," he said, without apology or embarrassment. "When he's scared. He doesn't like being scared." Amelia looked at him. 7 years old, she now thought, maybe 8, and already he had developed the emotional vocabulary to translate his father's anger into fear. That was not something children figured out on their own. That was something they learned by paying very close attention to the adults around them. "Most people don't," she said. "He wasn't loud at me last night," Lucas said. "He was quiet. He sat next to my bed for a long time." "I know." "Did you see him?" "I heard him." Lucas absorbed this. "He doesn't usually sit that long," he said. Before she could respond, the door opened all the way, and Romano was there. He had clearly not slept. He was still in the same clothes, his jacket gone now, his collar open, and there was a tension in the line of his shoulders that had not been there the night before, something new and sharp, like a wire pulled too tight. His eyes went to Lucas first. The shift that happened in his face when he saw the boy sitting up and alert was instantaneous and total. Every bit of whatever had been in that room at the end of the hall simply left him. He crossed to the bed and cupped the back of Lucas's head with one hand, the way you'd handle something irreplaceable. "How does your chest feel?" he said. "Sore." She said. "That means the medicine worked." Romano glanced at Amelia. Amelia," Lucas said. "She's a nurse. She says nurses are actually better than doctors in some situations." "Does she?" Romano's voice was dry. He looked at her. "I need to speak with you. Your son needs breakfast first." A pause. "Marco will bring something," he said, and before she could argue, he stepped into the hallway. She heard him say a name quietly, and then he came back and stood near the door, watching Lucas with an expression she recognized. She had seen it on the faces of parents in her emergency room after the worst of it had passed, and their children were safe, and they were still running on adrenaline, and couldn't quite make themselves step back from the edge of the terror. It was love, but it was love with nowhere to go. Love that had been clenched into a fist for hours and didn't yet know how to open. A man appeared with food on a tray within 4 minutes, and Amelia supervised Lucas eating while Romano stood near the door and watched. She showed the boy how to sit forward slightly so his sore chest was less compressed. She made him drink water before anything else. She answered his questions about what CPR actually was, which led to a conversation about how hearts work that lasted through most of his breakfast and clearly fascinated him. Romano watched all of this without interrupting. When Lucas had eaten enough and his eyes were starting to drift with the comfortable weight of someone who had his belly full and his father visible and his body slowly releasing the shock of the night before, Amelia stood. "I'll check on him in an hour," she told Romano. "He should sleep more if he can." She walked toward the door. Romano stepped into the hallway with her and pulled the door almost closed behind them. The crash, he said without preamble, was not an accident. I know. He looked at her. You know, I saw the other vehicle before I reached Lucas. The angle of impact was deliberate. The speed was too controlled for a collision. Someone knew that vehicle's route. She kept her voice even. I didn't say anything last night because your son needed to be my focus, and what happened on that street was not my business. And now? And now I'm telling you that I noticed. Because it seems like it might matter that there was a witness who saw what I saw. She looked at him. Do you know who it was? I am working to find out. Your son was the target. Romano's jaw tightened. That is what I am working to find out. He's 8 years old. I know how old my son is. I'm not criticizing you. I'm telling you that a child who has been through what he went through last night is going to need consistency and calm around him for the next several days. Whoever hurt that child is going to try again. And fear is contagious, especially to children. She held his gaze. He watches you. Everything you feel, he feels. You need to know that. Romano was very quiet for a moment. You speak to me, he said, as if you know me. I don't know you at all. I know your son. I've known him for approximately 8 hours, and in that time I have learned that he is perceptive, emotionally intelligent, and paying extremely close attention to everything happening around him. That's not a criticism of you either. That's a description of a child who loves his father very much and has learned to read him carefully. Something moved in Romano's face, a crack, quickly sealed. You are very direct, he said. I work in an emergency room. People don't have time for anything else. He studied her for a moment. Why haven't you asked me who I am? I know who you are, Mr. Romano. And yet you are not frightened. I didn't say that. She met his eyes. I said I work in emergency medicine. Fear and action are not mutually exclusive. You learn to do what needs doing regardless of what you're feeling. For the second time since she'd met him, something at the corner of his mouth shifted almost imperceptibly. It was not quite a smile, but it was the shadow of one. There are some questions I need to ask you, he said. About last night, what you saw before the impact. The direction the other vehicle came from. The timing. He paused. It will not take long. She thought about this. She thought about her shift, which started in an hour and 10 minutes, and about the 20-minute call she'd need to make to the charge nurse, and about the fact that her keys were still somewhere on that wet street. I'll answer your questions, she said, and I need someone to call my hospital and explain that I won't be in this morning. Done, and I need my keys found. Done. She looked at him. You're very confident about things being done. In my world, he said simply, things either get done or they don't. I stopped hoping somewhere in the middle. She didn't have an answer for that. She followed him down the hall. The room he brought her to was lined with screened security footage from what appeared to be dozens of different cameras across the city. There were 3 men she hadn't seen before already in the room, all of them in the same dark suits, all of them with the same controlled stillness. They glanced at her when she entered and then looked at Romano. He said 2 words and they left. She sat across from him at the table and told him what she'd seen. She was precise about it, time, angle, speed. Trajectory the way she was precise about patient histories. She did not embellish, she did not speculate, she described what she had actually observed and stopped there. Romo listened without taking notes, which meant either he had an excellent memory or someone on the other side of those screens was recording everything she said. She assumed the latter. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment. The vehicle came from the left, he said, from a side street. And you're certain it was already at speed when it entered the intersection? Yes, which means it wasn't waiting at a light. It was already moving before it turned, which means it had been circling. She hadn't followed the logic that far, but it was correct. Yes, that's consistent with what I saw. Romano stood. He moved to one of the screens and studied it. She could see his profile, the clean hard line of his jaw, the way his eyes moved across the footage with that same systematic precision she'd noticed from the beginning. Whatever else he was, Alexander Romano was not a man who missed things. Two men, he said, almost to himself, one driving, one watching the other vehicle's position. He turned. My son's driver changed the route at the last minute. He was the only one who knew. The implication settled between them. The driver, she said. The driver is currently answering questions. She decided not to ask what that meant. There is a second problem, Romano said. He came back to the table. He did not sit. He looked at her with those dark eyes that gave away nothing he didn't intend to give away. You were seen, on at least a dozen phones, carrying my son. Performing CPR on a public street. He paused. Your face is connected to this event now. And the people who tried to hurt Lucas will eventually learn that there was a witness who spoke to me afterward. The room was very quiet. You're telling me I'm in danger, she said. I'm telling you that, until I know the scope of this, until I know who ordered it and how many people are involved, I would feel more comfortable if you remained here. Amelia sat with that for a moment. Mr. Romano, I have a job. I have patients who need me. I have a life that exists outside of this house, and none of that life involves your enemies or your business or whatever is happening in this city that would make someone try to kill an 8-year-old boy. None of that matters, he said, to the kind of person who would target a child. She knew he was right. She hated that she knew it. She looked at the table. She looked at the screen with the footage from the street the night before. She looked at her own hands. I am not a prisoner, she said. No, I have conditions. He waited. My hospital is called. My friend Dana is contacted and told I am safe. I have access to a phone at all times. My movements inside this house are unrestricted. She looked up. And you are honest with me about what's happening. I am not a guest to be managed. If I am in danger because of what happened last night, I am entitled to understand why. Romano looked at her for a long moment. Agreed, he said. All of it? All of it, he confirmed. She nodded slowly. Then I'll stay. For now. She had been in the house for 6 hours when she understood that Alexander Romano ran an empire from those rooms the way other men ran corporations. People came and went constantly, not through the front, but through a side entrance she had noticed but not mentioned. They spoke to Romano in low voices, handed him things, received instructions, left. He was always either on his phone or in quiet conversation with someone, and the house operated around him with the precision of something long practiced. She spent most of the morning with Lucas, who was recovering with the remarkable speed of young children, and was already asking if he could get out of bed. Dr. Petrov arrived at 10 and conducted the follow-up evaluation she had requested. No internal bleeding, no neurological concerns. The boy was, as Petrov put it with what seemed like genuine surprise, in excellent condition, given what he had survived. You did good work last night, Petrov told her, quietly, while Lucas was distracted with a game on a tablet someone had produced. He did most of it, she said. Petrov studied her with a professional curiosity. How did you end up here? I was walking home. At the right moment. That's one way to look at it. Around noon, Romano appeared in the doorway of Lucas's room, and Lucas immediately pushed the tablet aside with an energy he had not shown for the previous 3 hours. Something shifted in both of them, a realignment, immediate and mutual, and Amelia understood in that moment that whatever else Romano's life contained, the relationship between this man and his son was the one thing in it that was entirely uncomplicated. It was the one place in his world where he was simply a father, and he was, whatever his faults might have been, a very present one. She excused herself to give them privacy. She was in the kitchen, drinking coffee and going through her phone, when one of the suited men, the one she'd heard called Marcus, appeared in the doorway. Mr. Romano would like to see you, he said. When you're ready. Tell him 5 minutes. Marcus blinked. He was clearly not accustomed to receiving time frames. She finished her coffee. She found Romano in a different room, this time smaller, more private, with no screens. Just a table and 2 chairs, and a window with the blinds half drawn. He was standing when she entered, and he gestured to a chair. She sat. He sat. The driver confessed, he said. She kept her expression neutral. What did he say? He was approached 3 weeks ago. Offered a significant amount of money to report Lucas's movements and alter the route when he received a signal. He paused. He claims he didn't know what they intended to do. He thought it was surveillance. He didn't realize it was an assassination attempt until the other vehicle appeared. Do you believe him? Romano's expression told her exactly what he thought of that question. No, she said, I suppose not. She looked at him. Who sent the signal? That is what I do not yet know. He folded his hands on the table. The gesture was controlled, but she could see the tension in his forearms. The driver received instructions through a phone that cannot be traced. The money was routed through accounts in 3 different countries. This was planned carefully by someone who has done this before. He looked at her. And by someone who has detailed knowledge of my operations, of my son's schedule, of the routes my drivers take. She understood where he was going. Someone inside, she said. Someone close. The silence between them was heavy. How many people know Lucas's schedule on a given day? She asked. Normally, 8, 9. And you trust all of them? I trusted all of them, he said. Past tense. Very deliberate. That is no longer the situation. She thought about this. She thought about the way he had walked toward her on that street, controlled, certain, surrounded by men who moved at his direction without hesitation. She thought about a world where the person trying to destroy you was someone you had chosen to surround yourself with, where the danger was inside the perimeter, not outside it. She had seen that kind of betrayal in hospital settings. Not violent, not criminal, but the fundamental damage of being harmed by someone trusted. She knew what it did to people. You said you would be honest with me, she said. I said that. So tell me honestly, am I actually safer here than at home? He met her eyes. For now, yes. Because whoever did this knows that you saw something. They don't know how much you told me. They don't know how much you know. You are a variable they cannot calculate, and that makes you a target. He paused. Here, you are visible to my security and under my protection. In your apartment, you are alone, and you're also keeping me here, because I know what you look like with your walls down, she said. Because I'm a witness to who you are when you're not performing. And that makes you uncertain about me. Romano went very still. That is, he said, after a moment, an unusually perceptive observation. I told you. I know people. He looked at her. There was something different in his expression, now not quite respect, not quite suspicion, but something in between. The look of a man recalibrating. You are not what I expected, he said. What did you expect? Someone who was afraid. Someone who would take the money and the gratitude and ask no further questions. I'm not afraid, she said. And then, honestly, or I am afraid, but it doesn't change what I do. And I always ask further questions. It's how I keep people alive. The room was quiet. Amelia, he said. It was the first time he'd used her name. There is something I need to show you. He laid a photograph on the table between them. It was a surveillance image, grainy, taken from a distance, but clear enough. It showed a man she didn't recognize standing outside what appeared to be her hospital. The timestamp read 2 days ago. This man, Romano said, has been watching St. Matthew's for 72 hours. We picked him up on our own cameras because he came within range of our surveillance network. He paused. He was not watching the hospital. He was watching the entrance that emergency room staff use. The cold that moved through her had nothing to do with the temperature of the room. He was watching for me, she said. The photograph was taken before the accident. Before you saved my son. Before any of this. She looked up from the photograph. That doesn't make sense, she said. I had no connection to you or Lucas before last night. Why would anyone? She stopped. Because she saw it in his face, the thing he had been deciding whether to tell her. The thing that had been in his eyes since he first turned them on her at that crash scene, that moment of assessment that had been too careful, too deliberate for a man simply looking at a stranger who'd saved his son. You already knew who I was, she said. Before last night. Romano did not look away. Before the accident, she said. You knew my name. You knew where I worked. Still, he said nothing. Alexander. She used his first name without planning to. Tell me the truth. You said you would. And for the first time since she'd met him, Alexander Romano looked at a woman across a table and told her something he clearly had not intended to tell her. Your father, he said, was a man named Daniel Carter. He died 4 years ago. You were told it was a heart attack. Amelia went very still. It was not a heart attack, Romano said. He was killed by the same organization that attempted to kill my son. He paused. And the man in that photograph, the man who had been watching your hospital for 3 days, worked for that organization. And he did it because they recently discovered that your father, in the last months of his life, left evidence. Evidence of what they did. Evidence he gave to only one person. He looked at her. Evidence he gave to you, whether you know it or not. The silence that fell was total. Amelia sat in it. She thought about her father, quiet, careful Daniel Carter, who had worked as an accountant his whole life and died of what the doctor called a massive cardiac event on a Tuesday afternoon in March 4 years ago. She thought about the box of his belongings she had put in her closet and had not opened because opening it had felt like something she needed to do when she was ready, and she had never been ready. What kind of evidence? She asked. Her voice was level. She was proud of that. We don't know exactly, Romano said. But we know they want it back. And we know that the accident last night was not only about my son. She looked at him. It was a message, she said. It was meant to be. They were going to kill your son to send you a message and hurt you. And simultaneously they were going to get to me. 2 targets. One night. She worked through it the way she worked through a complicated diagnosis, following each thread to where it led. They knew I would be on that street. They knew the vehicle's route. They put me in proximity to the crash so that if I survived, I would be the obvious suspect. Or the obvious collateral damage. Yes. But I didn't react the way they expected. No one anticipated you running toward a burning vehicle. She almost laughed. It was not a happy sound. My father, she said. What was he involved in? He was an accountant. He was a very good accountant, Romano said. Good enough that certain people paid him very well to manage numbers they could not trust to banks. He held her gaze. And good enough that eventually he understood exactly what those numbers meant and who they were hurting. He spent the last 2 years of his life quietly documenting everything. And then they killed him. And then they killed him. Amelia looked at the photograph on the table. She looked at the man who had been watching the door she walked through every single morning. Who are they? She asked. An organization that has been operating inside my city for 30 years, Romano said. An organization I have been at war with for the last decade. An organization that, until last night, I thought I understood. And last night I discovered I do not. She looked at him. Because someone inside your people is working with them.
Yes.
And your son nearly died because of it.
Yes.
She pushed her chair back from the table and stood. She needed to move. She walked to the window, stood with her back to him for a moment, processing. She thought about her father. She thought about the box in her closet. She thought about 4 years of grief built on a lie about a Tuesday afternoon and a heart that had not failed on its own. She turned around. I want to see the evidence, she said. You may not have it. He was my father, and he died for it. And whatever he put in that box, he put it there for me to find. Her voice did not shake. I want to see it. Romano stood. He looked at her across the room. With that expression she was beginning to recognize, the one that was not quite surprise, not quite admiration, but something that lived in the space between the two. You understand, he said carefully, that if you look at whatever your father left you, if you engage with this, you are no longer simply a woman who happened to be at the scene of an accident. I was never simply that, she said. You just told me so yourself. A long pause. No, he said, I suppose you were not. She held his gaze. I am going to find out what my father died for. That is not negotiable. The question is whether you help me or whether you stand in my way. Something settled in his face. There is a third option, he said. What's that? I stand beside you, Alexander Romano said, instead of in either direction. The house was quiet around them, and somewhere down the hall, Lucas Romano was sleeping safely. And the city outside was moving through its ordinary afternoon with no idea that in a room with the blinds half drawn, 2 people who had been strangers 24 hours ago had just decided to trust each other with the most dangerous things they carried. The box arrived at the Romano estate the following morning. Marcus had driven to Amelia's apartment with 2 other men and a detailed list of what she needed: clothing, her nursing bag, her laptop, and the box from the top shelf of her bedroom closet. The one she had described as brown cardboard, with her father's initials written in black marker on the side. She had told Marcus exactly where to find it without letting herself think too hard about what she was asking for, because if she thought about it too hard she would feel it, and she could not afford to feel it yet. She heard the car return. She did not go to the door. She was sitting with Lucas, helping him with a puzzle that one of the staff had produced from somewhere, a 500-piece landscape that he was attacking with the systematic ferocity of a child who had decided to master something. He had been asking her questions all morning, about nursing, about the human heart, about whether she had ever seen someone actually die, which he asked with the frank curiosity of a child who understood death abstractly but had not yet learned to be afraid of the question. She answered him honestly, the way she always answered children, honestly, because she had learned long ago that children knew when they were being protected from truth, and it made them trust you less. Yes, she told him. I've seen people die. Were you scared? Yes, every time. He considered this while fitting a piece into the puzzle. But you still did your job. Being scared doesn't mean you stop. It means you pay attention. He looked up at her. Those dark eyes, his father's eyes, the same depth and the same quality of seeing more than they should. Papa says that too. He says fear is information. Your papa is right. He's right about a lot of things. Lucas paused. He's wrong about some things too. Like what? He thinks I can't tell when he's lying to me about being okay. The boy said it without accusation, completely matter of fact. He always does this thing with his jaw when he's lying. He pressed his lips together in demonstration, a precise mimicry that was devastating in its accuracy. He thinks I don't notice. Amelia looked at this child and felt something close to awe. You should tell him that, she said. I did once. Lucas fitted another piece. He laughed. It was a real laugh, not a polite one. I like his real laugh. He doesn't use it very much. Marks knocked on the open door. Miss Carter, your things are here. She excused herself from Lucas with a promise to return, and went to where her belongings had been brought in and set carefully in the hallway. Her bag, her laptop, her clothes in a duffel, and the box. It was exactly as she remembered it. Brown cardboard. Her father's handwriting on the side, DC, in the careful block letters he had used for everything, the same handwriting that had signed her birthday cards for 30 years. It was taped shut, and the tape was slightly yellowed because it had been sitting on that shelf for 4 years and she had not touched it. She picked it up. It was heavier than she expected. She carried it to the room she had been given, set it on the bed, and stood looking at it for a full minute without moving. Then she heard footsteps in the hall, and Alexander appeared in the doorway. He looked at the box. He looked at her. Do you want privacy? He asked. No. The word surprised her as she said it, but it was true. She did not want to be alone with this. Stay. He came in and stood near the wall, hands in his pockets, giving her space without leaving. She pulled the tape open. Inside were papers. A lot of them printed documents, handwritten notes, ledgers with columns of figures, photographs. Her father's reading glasses were there, folded carefully on top of everything, and the sight of them hit her in the center of the chest like a closed fist. She picked them up and held them for a moment and put them in her pocket. She lifted the first document, columns of numbers, account numbers, transfer dates, amounts that moved money in increments designed to stay beneath the threshold of automatic reporting. She recognized it as the architecture of financial crime, not because she had studied it, but because she was her father's daughter and he had explained to her once, very carefully and in general terms, how people moved money they couldn't explain. She understood, looking at this, that he had been explaining his own situation. That he had been preparing her to read this, someday, when he was no longer there to read it with her. She set the papers on the bed, and Alexander came to look at them. He was quiet for a long moment. These account numbers, he said. I recognize 3 of them. She looked at him. They belong to a man named Victor Crane, he said. Who is Victor Crane? He is nominally a real estate developer. He builds things, office buildings, residential towers, renovation projects in neighborhoods being revitalized. He sits on 3 charitable boards. He plays golf with city council members. Romano's voice was flat and precise. He is also the man who has been funding opposition to my organization for 8 years. He's your enemy. He is one of them. The visible one. He picked up one of the pages. These transfers, these are specific. Dates, amounts, destination accounts. This is not just bookkeeping. This is evidence of specific crimes. He looked at her. Your father understood exactly what he was documenting. She picked up another document. This one was handwritten, her father's neat, careful print, different from the block letters on the box. It was a letter, addressed to no one, beginning with no salutation. Just words on a page in her father's voice, and reading it was like hearing him speak from somewhere very far away. She read it aloud, because she needed to hear it, and because Alexander Romano, who had told her the truth when he didn't have to, had earned the right to hear it too. I have worked for these men for 11 years. I told myself it was numbers. That numbers had no morality, that I was not responsible for what the numbers were used for. I was a coward for believing that, for as long as I did it. I am writing this because I have run out of time and I know it. They have realized I know too much. I have been careful but not careful enough. Amelia, if you are reading this, then I am gone, and they think they have won. They have not won. Everything I documented is in this box. Account numbers, transfer records, names. Everything you need to understand what they have been doing and who has protected them from consequences for 3 decades. The most important name is not Crane. Crane is the front. The man behind Crane, the man who gives the orders and has done so since before you were born, someone no one suspects. Someone trusted, someone respected. His name is in the final envelope. The one sealed with red wax. Do not open it in public. Do not open it alone. Open it with someone you trust, and then act quickly, because once that name is known, you will not have much time. I am sorry I was not braver sooner. I am sorry I chose safety over truth for so many years. I hope the man I tried to be at the end is the man you remember. All my love, always. Dad. The room was very still when she finished. She folded the letter with both hands, pressing the creases the way he had taught her to fold things when she was small, and she held it against her chest for exactly 3 seconds. Then she set it down and reached into the box. At the bottom, beneath everything else, was an envelope. Small, sealed with dark red wax, the kind of old-fashioned seal that nobody used anymore except for people who wanted to be absolutely certain something had not been opened. Her father's ring, the signet ring he had worn on his right hand for as long as she could remember, had pressed a pattern into the wax. She picked it up. She looked at Alexander. Final envelope, she said. He nodded. She broke the seal. Inside was a single piece of paper. 1 name, 2 lines of explanation, and a phone number. She read it. The blood left her face so completely that Alexander stepped toward her, instinctively, before she held up one hand. I'm all right, she said. You are not. I will be. She looked at the paper again, making absolutely certain she was reading it correctly, that she had not misunderstood or projected meaning that wasn't there. The letters on the page were clear and black and unmistakable. She handed it to Alexander. He took it, he read it. And something happened in his face that she had not seen before, not quite anger, not quite shock, but something that went deeper than both. Something that looked like the particular devastation of a man who has just understood that a wound he thought came from outside his walls had been inflicted from within. That the person who has been hurting him most was someone he had looked at across tables for years. Someone he had trusted. He set the paper down. He walked to the window. He stood with his back to her for a long moment. Thomas, she said, because it needed to be spoken aloud. Yes, he said. Your chief of security. Yes. The man responsible for Lucas's safety. Yes. He has been working with Crane for how long? Alexander turned. His face was composed, that extraordinary self-control was back, the architecture of control that he wore like armor, but his eyes told a different story. According to your father's documentation, at minimum 6 years. Possibly longer. 6 years, she repeated. He has been inside your organization. with full access to your operations, your son's schedule, your vulnerabilities, for 6 years. And I did not see it. She heard what was underneath those words. Not just anger, something older and heavier. The weight of a man who prided himself on reading people, on trusting no one he had not thoroughly evaluated, discovering that the most dangerous person in his world was the one he had evaluated most carefully and gotten completely wrong. "He is here," she said, "in this house." Alexander was already moving to the door. He opened it and said one word to someone outside, and within 30 seconds Marcus appeared. "Where is Reeves?" Alexander asked. Marcus's face did not change. "Security office. He arrived 20 minutes ago. Keep him there. Do not alert him. Tell him I need a briefing in 1 hour." Marcus left. Alexander came back into the room. He looked at Amelia. "I need you to listen to me very carefully." "I'm listening." "Reeves knows you are here. He has known since last night because he processes all security logs. He knows what you brought with you today. He may not yet know what is in that box, but he will realize quickly that the situation has changed." He paused. "If he suspects that we have found the evidence, he will not wait for the hour. He'll run, or he'll do something worse." Alexander's voice was completely level, which somehow made it more frightening. "I need you to stay in this room with Lucas. Lock the door. Do not open it for anyone except me or Marcus." "And what are you going to do?" "I am going to have a conversation with Thomas Reeves." She looked at him. "Alexander, he tried to kill your son. He will not hesitate to hurt you. I know. You need to involve the police. This evidence, my father's documentation, it's enough. You can." "The police commissioner plays golf with Victor Crane," he said simply. She absorbed this. "How far does it go?" she asked. "That is what I am about to find out." He met her eyes. "I have managed worse situations than this one. He knows your movements. He knows your security protocols. He designed them." "Yes," a fractional pause. "Which means he also has a weakness I know about, that he doesn't know I know about. Every man who designs a system builds a flaw into it that only he can exploit. It is human nature. It makes him feel safe." His expression was completely calm. "I have known about Reeves's failsafe for 3 years. I simply did not know until today that I would need to use it against him." She stared at him. "You suspected him. I suspected everyone. Always. But I had no evidence." Something moved behind his eyes. "Now I do." He turned to go. "Alexander," he stopped. She crossed the room and picked up the box and held it out. "Take the documentation. All of it. Don't face him empty-handed." He took the box from her. Their hands were close for a moment, not touching, but close. "Lucas," she said, "if anything goes wrong, nothing will go wrong. If anything goes wrong, I will get him out of this house. I don't know how, but I will find a way." He looked at her for a moment that lasted longer than it should have. "I believe you," he said, and then he was gone. She locked the door. She went to Lucas's room connected to hers by a bathroom she had propped open and found him still at his puzzle, and she sat beside him and made herself breathe evenly and kept her hands steady and answered his questions about the puzzle with calm, even attention, and every part of her was listening to the house around them. For 18 minutes, nothing happened. Then she heard it raised voices, somewhere below. Not the controlled disagreement of before. Something sharper. Something that moved fast through the structure of the building, the way alarms moved. Lucas looked up from the puzzle. "What's that?" he said. "Probably just something being fixed," she said. "These old houses make a lot of noise." He looked at her jaw. She made herself relax it. "You did the thing," he said. She blinked. "What thing?" "The jaw thing. Papa does it when he's not okay." He studied her with those impossible eyes. "Are we not okay?" She looked at this child for one honest second and made a decision. "We might need to move in a minute," she said. "If I tell you to come with me, I need you to come immediately, and not ask questions until we're somewhere safe. Can you do that?" Lucas set down his puzzle piece. "Yes," he said. "Good. Where would we go?" "I don't know yet. But I'll figure it out." She kept her eyes on him. "You trust me?" He didn't hesitate. "Yes," she almost smiled. A child's trust offered without conditions was the most clarifying thing in the world. She heard footsteps in the hall, fast, purposeful, and she was on her feet before she had consciously decided to stand, placing herself between the door and Lucas, with the automatic instinct of 9 years of protecting patience. The footsteps stopped outside. 3 knocks rapid, a specific pattern. Marcus. She opened the door. Marcus's face was controlled but not calm. Behind him were 2 other men she recognized from the security detail. Mr. Romano needs. The boy moved. Marcus said now. What happened? Reeves is gone. He left through the east corridor 6 minutes ago. We have people looking, but he had a 15-minute head start on the security sweep. Marcus looked past her at Lucas. There is a vehicle ready, Mr. Romano says. Where is Alexander? Pursuing the situation. That means you don't know where he is. Marcus's silence was answer enough. She turned back to the room, grabbed her bag, grabbed Lucas's hand. The boy was on his feet already, his face serious, his jaw set in a line that was entirely his father's. Okay, she said to Marcus. Let's go. Which exit? North side. There's a secondary route that Reeves didn't design. Mr. Romano had it built last year independently. Smart man, she said, and meant it. They moved fast through the house, not running, because running communicated panic and panic was contagious. But walking fast, Lucas keeping pace without complaint, his hand small and warm and entirely steady in hers. She noticed that. She filed it away. Whatever else was true about this child's life, he had been prepared for difficulty. They were almost at the north corridor when her phone rang. She looked at the screen. It was an unknown number. But the area code was local. She answered. Miss Carter. The voice was male. Smooth, confident in the specific way of men who were accustomed to being obeyed. My name is Victor Crane. I think you know who I am. She kept walking. Lucas looked up at her. She squeezed his hand. Once I've got you, and kept moving. I know who you are, she said. Then you know I'm a reasonable man. And I'd like to have a reasonable conversation. I'm a little busy right now. I know exactly how busy you are, Crane said. I also know where you are, and which exit you're using. The north corridor. A pause. Miss Carter, your father was a good man. Careful, thorough. He built something very impressive. And now that you've read it, I'd like to discuss how this ends without anyone else getting hurt. She stopped walking. Marcus looked at her sharply. She held up one finger. How did you get this number, she said. Your father had it in his files. He kept meticulous records of everything important to him. You were at the top of that list. Crane's voice had the quality of a man performing reasonableness, hitting the right notes without feeling them. I'm not a monster, Miss Carter. I would prefer a conversation to any alternative. Then tell me what you want. The envelope. The contents. Everything in that box that relates to my operations. A beat. In exchange, you walk away from all of this. You go back to your hospital. You go back to your life. What happened to your father doesn't happen to you. She looked at Lucas, who was watching her with complete composure. She looked at Marcus, who was watching her with professional urgency. She looked at her own reflection in the dark glass of the corridor window, a woman who had run toward fire when everyone else ran away, holding the hand of a child who trusted her with the same ease he trusted his father. Mr. Crane, she said, I'm a nurse. I spend my professional life making decisions under pressure with incomplete information. And the one thing I've learned in 9 years is this: when someone tells you there's an easy way out, it's usually because they're afraid of what happens if you don't take it. She paused. You should have taken the evidence when you had access to it. You had 4 years to find that box. You didn't. That means you're desperate. Another pause. Desperate people don't offer reasonable conversations. They offer the illusion of one. Silence on the line. Walk away, Crane said, and the smoothness had dropped by several degrees. While you still can. No, she said, and ended the call. She looked at Marcus. He knows about the north corridor. How? It doesn't matter how. Find a different exit. Right now. Marcus didn't argue. He spoke quickly into his earpiece and pivoted direction, and she followed with Lucas without breaking stride, and the house moved around them like a living thing responding to a threat. And she held on to the hand of Alexander Romano's son, and refused with every cell in her body To be afraid enough to stop moving. 2 minutes later, her phone rang again. This time the number was Alexander's. She answered immediately. I just got a call from Crane. He knows the North Corridor exit. We changed route. A pause and then Alexander's voice, rough at the edges in a way it had not been before. Are you safe? For the moment. Where are you? Reeves is contained. He won't be a problem. Something in his voice told her not to ask for more detail. Which exit are you using? Asked Marcus. She handed the phone to Marcus, who spoke in low, rapid tones, and she focused on Lucas, who was moving beside her with the quiet determinations of someone who had been told to move and had decided that moving was what he would do. No negotiation, no complaint. She thought about her father, alone with this knowledge for 2 years, carrying it without telling anyone, protecting it until the last moment he could. She thought about Victor Crane's voice on the phone, that fractional drop in smoothness when she called his bluff. The sound of a man who had not expected her to say no. She thought about Alexander Romano, in some room in this house, dealing with the man who had spent 6 years inside his organization planning the death of his son. She thought about the name in the sealed envelope, and what it meant that a man like Reeves had been trusting Alexander's most important secrets. She thought about Lucas's hand in hers, steady and warm. She thought, my father left me a weapon he spent 2 years building and 2 years hiding, and it cost him his life, and I am not going to let it mean nothing. Marcus handed her phone back. Mr. Romano says use the garage on the south side. There's a vehicle and a driver he trusts. We go directly to a secondary location he uses that Reeves never knew about. Okay, she said. Let's go. Miss Carter. Marcus looked at her with the expression of a man reassessing something. That was well done. The phone call. I had a good teacher, she said. He looked confused. My father, she said, and she walked forward with Lucas Romano's hand in hers, toward whatever came next, carrying a dead man's truth and the absolute certainty that she was not going to stop until it meant something. The house fell away behind them, and somewhere in the city Victor Crane was realizing that the woman he had underestimated was not the woman he had planned for. She was her father's daughter, and she was only just getting started. The safe house was a brownstone in a neighborhood that looked ordinary in every direction. That was the point. Marcus brought them in through a side entrance, and there were already 2 men inside who nodded at Marcus and looked at Amelia and Lucas, with the careful neutrality of people doing exactly their job and nothing more. The building was clean and quiet, and stocked with enough supplies to last several days, which told Amelia that Alexander Romano had been preparing for the possibility of this moment for longer than anyone had admitted. Lucas sat on a couch and did not complain and did not cry and asked with complete practicality whether there was anything to eat. Someone produced food. Lucas ate. Amelia sat beside him and kept her breathing even and her hands still and her face calm, and underneath all of that she was running calculations the way she ran them in the emergency room resources available. Threats active, variables uncontrolled, time remaining unknown. Her phone rang 40 minutes after they arrived. Alexander. Are you there? He said. Yes. Lucas is fine, he's eating. She stepped away from the couch, lowering her voice. What happened with Reeves? A pause that told her the answer was complicated. Reeves had a contingency. He had documentation of his own evidence he had compiled over 6 years, specifically designed to be released if anything happened to him. A dead man's switch. Alexander's voice was controlled, but stripped down, the way voices got when people were working through something genuinely difficult. He was not just working for Crane, he was working for himself. He had been building leverage against everyone, against Crane, against me, against 17 other people, whose names I am still going through. He was protecting himself from all directions. He intended to retire with enough material to guarantee his safety for the rest of his life. Another pause. He was smarter than I gave him credit for. That is a mistake I will not make again. Where is he now? In a room where he will remain until I decide what to do with the information he has provided. The flatness in Alexander's voice left no room for follow-up questions, and she didn't ask any. The more immediate problem is Crane. Reeves has been feeding him information for 6 years, which means Crane knows things about my organization that I have spent years keeping private. financial structures, operational contacts, the names of people who work with me voluntarily and would face serious consequences if those names became public. He's going to use it. He already tried. An hour ago, 2 of my business partners received phone calls with specific threats. They called me within minutes of each other. His voice tightened fractionally. Crane is accelerating. He knows the window is closing. Your father's evidence, combined with what Reeves gave us, is enough to destroy him, and he knows that we know it. So he's going to do something drastic. He is going to try. She looked at Lucas across the room, who had finished eating and was now sitting very still, with his hands in his lap, doing what she recognized as the thing he did when he was worried, becoming very quiet and very controlled. His father's instinct already embedded in him at 8 years old. "Alexander," she said, "there's something I need to ask you." "Ask." "The phone number. In my father's letter. The one he included at the bottom of the page with his instructions. I didn't mention it earlier because everything moved too fast, but I've been thinking about it." She kept her voice low and steady. "He wrote a phone number. He said he wrote that if everything else failed, call this number. That this person would know what to do with the evidence." Silence. "I don't recognize it," she said. "It's not a number I've ever called. I've been trying to figure out who my father would have trusted with that as a final option, and I keep coming back to the same question. Do you know who it is?" "What is the number?" She read it to him. The silence that followed was different from the ones before it. "This one had weight, Alexander. That number," he said slowly, "belongs to a federal prosecutor named Catherine Walsh. She works out of the Southern District. She has been building a case against organized crime financing in this city for 4 years. He paused. "She approached me 8 months ago. Informally. She told me that she had a source who had been documenting financial crimes connected to several organizations, including some connected to Crane. She asked if I had any information that could support a prosecution." "What did you tell her?" "I told her I would consider it." And I did not call her back. A long exhale. "Because at the time I did not trust that she was not working an angle that would ultimately be used against me as much as against Crane. But my father trusted her. Your father trusted her enough to include her number as a last resort." A pause. "Which means he had contact with her. Which means she may already have some version of what is in that box." Amelia thought about this. If she has part of the evidence and we have the rest, together it would be sufficient to move forward with a federal prosecution that even Crane's connections cannot stop. He said it the way you said something you had been avoiding saying. Like setting down something heavy you had been carrying for too long. "The question is whether I am willing to make that call." "Are you?" The silence stretched. She did not fill it. "My world," Alexander said, "operates outside the mechanisms that Walsh represents. Going to a federal prosecutor is not something that happens without consequences for everyone in my organization. For people who have been loyal to me, for arrangements that have kept a certain balance in this city for years." Another pause. "It is not a simple decision." "No," she agreed. "But someone tried to kill your son. And they killed my father. And Victor Crane is sitting somewhere in this city right now, making phone calls, threatening people, and accelerating towards something none of us are going to like." She kept her voice level. Simple was never an option. The line was quiet for a long moment. "Make the call," Alexander said. "Walsh. Use the number from your father's letter. Tell her you have the complete documentation and that you need to meet tonight." "Tonight? If we wait until morning, Crane has more time." "Tonight is better. And you?" "I will be there. An hour, maybe less." A beat. "Amelia." "Yes. Do not open the door for anyone except Marcus until I arrive. You keep saying that to me. You keep being in situations where it is necessary." She almost smiled, and the fact that she almost smiled in the middle of all of this surprised her. "Drive carefully," she said. She ended the call and looked at Marcus, who had been standing near the door with the particular posture of a man pretending not to listen while listening to every word. "He's coming," she said. Marcus nodded. She went back to Lucas. He looked up at her with those dark eyes and said simply, "Is Papa okay?" "Yes." "Is he coming?" "Yes." Lucas nodded, and the tension in his small shoulders dropped by half. and he looked down at his hands and back up at her. You talked to him for a long time. We had a lot to discuss. About the man who hurt the car? She paused. 8 years old. She had promised herself honesty. Yes, about him and some other people connected to him. Is it going to be okay? She looked at this child, this boy who had survived a crash that should have killed him, who had held his composure through 2 days of crisis with a steadiness that shamed most adults she knew, who asked his father's questions in his father's voice and trusted her because he had decided to, and that was simply that. Yes, she said. It's going to be okay. And then, because he deserved honesty more than comfort, it's not okay yet. But it's going to get there. He thought about this. Okay, he said. And then, can I have something else to eat? She laughed a real laugh, sudden and involuntary, and it felt like releasing pressure from a sealed container. Yes, she said. Absolutely. She called Catherine Walsh, while Lucas was eating his second round of whatever the safe house kitchen had produced. The call was answered on the second ring, which meant either the prosecutor kept unusual hours, or she had been waiting for a call from this number for a long time. This is Walsh. My name is Amelia Carter. My father was Daniel Carter. He gave me your number and told me to call if everything else failed. She kept it simple and direct. I have his documentation. All of it. A pause that felt like a very controlled person, choosing their words with extreme care. Miss Carter, I have been hoping someone would make this call for 3 years. Another pause. Are you somewhere safe? For the moment. I need to meet with you. Tonight, if possible. That's why I'm calling. Are you alone? No. She thought about how to phrase the next part. I'm with Alexander Romano. The silence this time was different from all the previous silences. It had a specific quality, not surprise exactly, but the recalibration of someone who had built a picture in their mind and was now adjusting it for new information. Romano, Walsh said carefully. He has his own documentation. Related material. And he is willing to cooperate. Amelia looked at Marcus, who gave her an expression that communicated he was not entirely certain that last statement was accurate. She held his gaze and he looked away. We need a location. Neutral. Tonight. I know a place, Walsh said. How soon can you move? As soon as Romano arrives. 1 hour. I'll be there. Pause. Miss Carter, your father was a brave man. He made sure this was possible. Whatever happens tonight, that's because of him. Amelia's throat tightened for exactly 1 second. I know, she said. I'll see you in an hour. She ended the call. Marcus was looking at her. He agreed, she said, before Marcus could speak. He told me to make the call. He told you to call the prosecutor.
Yes.
Marcus looked at the floor for a moment, and she saw on his face something she hadn't expected, not resistance but relief. The relief of a man who had been waiting for a door to open that he hadn't been sure would ever open. Good, he said quietly. Alexander arrived 53 minutes later. He came in fast, the way he moved when he was managing urgency, without displaying it, contained, direct, his eyes finding Lucas first and then Amelia with the focus sequence of a man prioritizing. He crossed to Lucas immediately and crouched in front of the couch and put both hands on the boy's face and looked at him the way parents looked at children they had been afraid for. You're okay, he said. I'm fine, Papa. Lucas submitted to the examination with patient dignity. Amelia's been here. Alexander looked at her over his son's head. Thank you, he said, and it was the same as the first time, simple, unperformed, meaning exactly what it meant. Walsh is expecting us in 7 minutes, she said, because sentimentality had to wait. We need to move. He stood. He straightened his jacket. He was back to the Alexander Romano that the world saw, controlled, certain, the man who walked into rooms and made other men straighten their spines. But she had seen the other one, twice now, and she knew it was there. Lucas stays here with Marcus, he said. I know, she said. Lucas, she turned to the boy. I'll stay, Lucas said immediately. Be careful. He said it to both of them, with the even practicality of a child who had decided to be as adult as the situation required. Alexander touched his son's shoulder once. They left. Catherine Walsh was already at the location when they arrived, a private office above a legitimate law firm, accessed by a back staircase, the kind of neutral ground that people in Walsh's profession kept available for exactly this kind of meeting. She was smaller than Amelia had imagined, from the voice compact and precise, early 50s, with the alert, direct gaze of someone who evaluated everything they looked at and formed conclusions quickly. She looked at Amelia first. "Your father described you," she said. "He said you would be direct, and that I shouldn't mistake your composure for passivity." Amelia felt the familiar chest tightening that she was learning to move through rather than around. He was right. Walsh looked at Alexander. Whatever she thought about him, it was complex, and she kept most of it off her face. "Mr. Romano, I appreciate you being here. You understand my position," Alexander said. It was not a question. "I understand that your cooperation tonight is not a blanket arrangement, and that there are aspects of your operations that are not part of this conversation."
Correct.
"I also understand that the target of this investigation is Victor Crane, and the financial network he has used to fund criminal activities across this city for 3 decades, and that you have been a target of those activities as recently as 48 hours ago." "Correct." Walsh sat. She gestured to the other chairs. "Let me tell you what I have. Then you tell me what you have. Then we figure out what we can do with tonight." What Walsh had was substantial. She had 3 years of financial tracking, 2 confidential informants, neither of whom she named, and a record of 17 shell companies connected to Crane's operations. What she did not have was direct evidence linking Crane personally to any specific transaction, because Crane was careful and had spent 3 decades building distance between himself and the money. What Daniel Carter's box contained was the direct link. Account numbers with Crane's personal authorization codes. Transfer records, with his signature digital but traceable. Communications, printed and preserved, in which Crane gave explicit instructions about specific movements of funds. And most critically, a ledger page in Crane's own handwriting, documenting a payment made to a specific person for a specific action. An action that matched, in date and amount, a violent incident that Walsh had on file from 4 years ago. Walsh looked at the ledger page for a long time. "This is him," she said. "Yes," Amelia said. "He wrote this himself. My father believed it was the one piece of documentation Crane had produced personally, and never expected anyone to find, because he thought the person who could connect the handwriting to him was no longer in a position to do so." Walsh looked up. "Your father?" "Yes, he kept this safe for 4 years. He died for it," Amelia said, "so I would like it to mean something." Walsh set the page down carefully. The way you set down something you understood was irreplaceable. "It means something," she said. "Miss Carter, with this plus what I already have, I can move forward with an indictment within 48 hours." Amelia let out a breath she had been holding since she opened her father's box. Alexander spoke. "There is a secondary problem." He placed a drive on the table. "This contains documentation from Thomas Reeves, my former chief of security, who has been working with Crane for 6 years. It includes evidence of Crane's direct involvement in the attempt on my son's life 2 nights ago, as well as communications between Reeves and Crane planning the operation." He held Walsh's gaze. "I want the attempt on Lucas included in the indictment." "That can be done." Walsh looked at the drive. "You recovered this how?" "Reeves provided it. Voluntarily, he was persuaded that cooperation was in his interest." Walsh looked at Alexander for a moment with the expression of a woman who had been in law for 25 years and understood precisely what she was and was not going to ask. "I'll need Reeves's cooperation formalized. A statement. Official. That can be arranged. And I will need him in a form that is usable," she added carefully. "Which means physically present and functional. He is both." "Good." Walsh gathered the documents with practiced efficiency. "I'm going to need you both available in the next 48 hours. Phone contact at minimum. Formal statements as soon as I can arrange a protected setting." She looked at Amelia. "Are you safe where you are? For tonight. I'm going to have 2 of my people outside the safe house by morning. Non-negotiable." She looked at Alexander. "Crane is going to hear about this meeting. I don't know how or when, but he will. I know. He may move against you before the indictment. I know that too. And I have managed Victor Crane's attempts to move against me for 8 years," Alexander said. I am still here. He is about to not be. His voice held no bravado, no performance. It was simply the flat statement of a man describing a fact. I am not concerned about tonight. Walsh allowed herself a fraction of what might have been a smile. Your father raised a daughter with an excellent instinct for dangerous situations, she told Amelia. He raised a daughter who ran toward burning vehicles, Amelia said. Whether that's instinct or obstinacy is still under debate. Walsh stood and extended her hand. 48 hours, she said. Get some sleep if you can. They went back to the safe house. Lucas was asleep on the couch with a blanket Marcus had produced, his face completely relaxed, in the way that only sleeping children achieved. All the composure and control he held during waking hours simply gone. Nothing left but a small boy who had been through a great deal and was resting. Alexander stood over him for a long moment without speaking. Then he and Amelia sat across from each other at the table near the window, and the house was quiet around them, and for the first time in 48 hours there was nothing immediate to handle. No call to make, no exit to plan, no decision that couldn't wait until morning. She expected the quiet to feel like relief. Instead, it felt like arrival, like reaching a place she hadn't known she was traveling toward. What happens to you, she said, when this is over? He looked at her. What do you mean? The indictment will cover Crane. Walsh is careful she'll keep her word about the scope. But the things you do, the way this organization operates, she gestured at the room, at Marcus, near the door, at all of it. That doesn't go away, no, he said, it doesn't. Are you okay with that? He was quiet for a moment. I have been what I am for a long time. I did not become it by accident or by innocence. I made choices. Many of them I would not change. Some of them, he paused. Some of them I would. Like what? He looked at his son across the room. I would have kept him safer. I told myself the structures I built were sufficient. That if I was careful enough, what I was wouldn't touch him. A long pause. I was wrong, and it cost him 2 days of fear he should not have had to carry. He carried it well. He shouldn't have had to. His voice was level, but the weight in it was enormous. A child shouldn't have to be brave because his father's life made danger ordinary. That is not— He stopped, collected himself. That is not what I wanted for him. She looked at him. Then change it, she said. It is not simple. Nothing about any of this has been simple. She met his eyes. But you are choosing every day. You have always been choosing. Some of those choices built what's around you. Other choices built the person Lucas described to me this morning, the one who sits beside him until he falls asleep and has a real laugh he doesn't use very often. She paused. You don't have to decide tonight what everything looks like going forward. But you have to know that you're deciding. He looked at her for a long time. You have been in my house for 2 days, he said. You know me better than people who have known me for 20 years. I told you. I know people, it is more than that. She didn't answer Amelia. He said her name the way he'd said it once before, plain and direct, without any armor around it. Why did you really stay? She thought about the honest answer. She had been turning it over in her mind since the first morning, examining it from different angles the way she examined symptoms, looking for what was true underneath the story she was telling herself. Because Lucas needed someone stable, she said. And because my father died for something and I needed to finish what he started. She paused. And because— She stopped. Because? Because when you said you would stand beside me instead of in my way, I believed you. She looked at him. I don't believe things easily. I've learned not to. But I believed that. A pause, and I wanted to see what that meant. The house was very quiet. Outside, the city moved through its ordinary night, indifferent to the 48 hours that had just changed the shape of everything. Alexander Romano looked at the woman across the table, the nurse who had run toward his burning vehicle, who had argued with his guards and spoken to him like a human being when no one else in his world did, who had opened her father's box and read her father's last words and held herself together through all of it with the particular steadiness of someone who had decided that falling apart was not an option they were willing to take. He looked at her the way he had looked at very few things in his life, with complete attention, nothing held back, no calculation behind it. I have an organization to restructure, he said, loyalties to reevaluate. A son who deserves more stability than I have given him. He paused. And I have spent 48 hours discovering that the person I trusted most had betrayed me, and the person I had no reason to trust at all. He stopped. Showed up, she finished. Yes, he said, showed up. He looked at his hands. Then at her. I do not know how to ask for things. I have spent my adult life ensuring I never needed to ask. I know, she said. I am going to need to ask. I know that too. Amelia. The weight in her name was the weight of a man who did not say things he did not mean. Stay. Not because it is safer. Not because of Lucas, though he needs you. But because he stopped again. Because I am better at this when you are here. At being a person rather than a position. She was quiet for a moment. She thought about her apartment, her hospital, her life, the small, difficult, honest life she had built. She thought about Dana, who would have 1,400 things to say about all of this. She thought about her father, who had spent 20 years compromising and 2 years trying to fix it and had died before he could see what it became. She thought about running toward a burning vehicle while everyone else ran away. She thought about what it meant that she had done, that her whole life in every way there was to do it, and that it had brought her here. She looked at Alexander Romano. Ask properly, she said. He met her eyes, and something shifted in his face, a wall coming down, not quickly or easily, but coming down. Will you stay, he said. Not tonight, not until the trial, but after. Will you stay and help me figure out who I am supposed to be on the other side of all of this? Outside, a car passed on the street below. Lucas made a small sound in his sleep and settled deeper into the couch. Amelia Carter, who had never wanted power, who had never asked for anything beyond a paycheck and a day off, looked at the most dangerous man in New York, who was sitting at a table in a safe house at 2 a.m, asking her to stay. With no performance and no armor and nothing behind it but honesty. Yes, she said, and that was the moment the war ended. Not because the enemy had been defeated, he hadn't. Not yet. Not because the indictment had been filed, it hadn't. Not because everything was resolved or safe or simple, it was none of those things. But because two people who had spent their lives either running toward fire or building walls against it had sat across from each other in the quiet and said the true thing. And that was where everything began to change. The indictment came down on a Thursday morning, 41 hours after Amelia sat across from Catherine Walsh and placed her father's life's work on a neutral table in a room above a law firm. Amelia heard about it from Dana. Dana called at 7:12 in the morning. While Amelia was standing in the kitchen of the Romano estate they had returned the previous evening, when Walsh's people confirmed the perimeter was clean, drinking her first coffee of the day and watching Lucas eat breakfast with the focused efficiency of a child who had decided that eating quickly meant more time for other things. Turn on the news, Dana said, without preamble. Good morning to you too. Amelia, turn on the news right now. She found the remote and turned on the television, mounted on the kitchen wall, and the first thing she saw was Victor Crane's face photographed in better days, used now above a chyron that read federal indictment. Prominent developer Victor Crane charged with financial crimes, conspiracy, and attempted murder. Lucas looked up from his breakfast. He looked at the television. He looked at Amelia. Is that the man? He asked. She kept her voice steady. Yes. He looked back at the screen for a moment, his expression serious and composed. Then he went back to his breakfast. Dana, Amelia said into the phone. 17 counts, Dana said. They're saying it's one of the largest organized crime financial cases in the history of the Southern District. They're saying there's documentary evidence going back decades. A pause. Amelia. They're saying a private citizen provided critical documentation. They're not naming you, but Amelia, did you do this? She looked at Lucas, who was eating his eggs with complete concentration and pretending not to listen while listening to everything. My father did this, she said. I just finished it. Dana was quiet for a moment. When she spoke again, her voice was different, softer, with the weight of 4 years of knowing Amelia Carter and understanding, in this moment, what those 4 years had actually contained. Daniel would be so proud of you, she said. The tightening in Amelia's chest was familiar now. She had learned to breathe through it. I know, she said. I'll call you later. She ended the call and stood with her coffee and watched the news cycle begin the process of dismantling Victor Crane's 30-year construction of respectability. And she thought about her father sitting alone with a box of documents and the knowledge that he was running out of time. And she thought about the 2 years he had spent building something he would not live to see used. She thought he saw this. Somewhere he saw this. She let herself believe that. Just for a moment. Then she put it away and turned to Lucas. Finish your eggs, she said. He grinned a real grin, quick and bright, entirely his own. You sound like Mrs. Chen. Who's Mrs. Chen? My teacher. She always says, finish before you talk. He took a large, deliberate bite. Papa says she would terrify most of his associates. Amelia almost choked on her coffee. Your papa is probably right. Alexander appeared in the doorway. He had been on the phone since 5 in the morning. She had heard him through the wall, his voice low and constant, managing the aftermath of the indictment, the way he managed everything, with systematic precision and no wasted motion. He looked like a man who had not slept but had decided sleep was irrelevant. He looked at the television. He looked at Lucas. Something in his face settled. You saw, Amelia said. My lawyer called at 6. He came into the kitchen and poured his own coffee and stood beside her, facing the television with the expression of a man watching the conclusion of something that had taken a very long time. Walsh moved faster than I expected. She said 48 hours. She did it in 41. There was something in his voice that was not quite admiration, but lived next to it. She had been ready. She was waiting for the last piece. He looked at Amelia. Your father's piece. Yes, they stood in companionable silence for a moment, which was something she had noticed happening, more often the two of them occupying the same space without the need to fill it. The particular comfort of people who had been through something together and no longer needed to perform ease because the ease had become real. Lucas finished his eggs. He carried his plate to the sink with the practiced responsibility of a child who had been taught that staff were people and not furniture. He rinsed it. He put it in the rack. He looked at his father. Is it over? He asked. Alexander looked at his son. The worst of it, he said. Yes. Good. Lucas wiped his hands on a dish towel. Can I go back to school? Alexander blinked. Of all the questions he had been prepared for, this was apparently not among them. You want to go back to school. I've missed 4 days. Mrs. Chen assigns makeup work for every day you miss. It compounds. He said the word compounds with the gravity of someone describing a natural disaster. I need to go back before it gets worse. Amelia looked at Alexander. Alexander looked at his son. 2 more days, he said. Until Walsh confirms the secondary arrests, Lucas calculated. That's going to be a lot of makeup work. I will speak with Mrs. Chen. She doesn't really negotiate, Papa. Everyone negotiates. Not Mrs. Chen. Amelia covered her mouth with her coffee cup. Alexander caught her expression and gave her a look that was trying very hard not to be a smile and failing at the edges. 2 days, he said again to Lucas. Then school. Lucas accepted this with dignity and went to find something to do, and the kitchen settled back into quiet, and Amelia looked at the man beside her and thought about the question she had been turning over since the night before. She set down her coffee. The restructuring, she said. He looked at her. You mentioned it last night, that you had an organization to restructure, loyalties to reevaluate. She kept her voice neutral, because this was not a confrontation, it was a continuation of the most honest conversation she had ever had with anyone. I've been thinking about what that actually means. Tell me what you think it means. I think it means you have a choice that you have been avoiding acknowledging as a choice. I think you have run this organization since your father died, and I think you have told yourself for years that the shape of it was fixed. That you were managing something inherited rather than building something chosen. She looked at him. But Crane is gone. Reeves is gone. The structure he helped design is exposed. You have to rebuild anyway. The question is what you rebuild it into. Alexander was quiet for a long moment. You are describing a version of this, he said slowly. That requires me to believe change is possible without destroying what I have spent 20 years constructing. Not destroying. Redirecting. She held his gaze. You have resources. Significant ones. You have loyalty from people who have worked with you for years, because you were worth being loyal to, not because they were afraid. I've seen it in Marcus. I've seen it in the way people talk about you when they think you're not listening. A pause. Fear keeps people compliant. Respect keeps them committed. You've always known the difference. You just haven't always chosen the second one. He looked at her for a long time. The Romano Foundation, he said. It was established 3 years ago, officially for charitable purposes. In practice, it has functioned primarily as a structural vehicle. He paused. Could be more than that. Yes, she said. It could. Medical funding. Community programs. He said it the way he said everything, measuring the words, committing to them only when he was certain. St. Matthew's has a pediatric wing that has been underfunded for years. She stared at him. How do you know that? I know things about this city. A fractional pause. And I know where you work. She was quiet. It would require someone to run it who understood both the medical need and the organizational structure, he said. Someone with credibility in the medical community and the judgment to distinguish between funding that helps and funding that performs helpfulness. He looked at her. I am not asking you to give up nursing. I know you're not. I am asking you to consider whether there is a version of what you do that is larger than what one person can do in one emergency room on one shift. She thought about every patient she had not been able to save because the resources weren't there. Every family she had watched navigate a system that was never designed to be navigated easily. Every night she had driven home, knowing that somewhere in the city, someone was falling through gaps that didn't have to exist. She thought about her father, who had spent 20 years telling himself that what he did was just numbers, and 2 years trying to correct the damage. She thought about the difference between managing what existed and building what should. Let me think about it, she said. Of course. He picked up his coffee. I have approximately 14 calls to return, and a lawyer who has been patient far beyond his professional obligation. But I wanted to say something before I go. She waited. Last night you asked me to ask properly, he said. And I did, and you said yes. He met her eyes. I want you to know that I understood what you were saying yes to. Not to comfort, not to safety, not to what I can provide. A pause. To this. To the version of this that is honest and difficult and not finished yet. To working out what it becomes without knowing in advance what that is. She looked at him. Alexander, she said. I ran toward your burning vehicle while everyone else ran away. I broke the window with an umbrella. I performed CPR on a wet street in front of strangers. I opened a box I had been afraid to open for 4 years. She paused. I don't do halfway. The corner of his mouth moved. Not the fractional almost smile she had catalogued over the past several days. Something fuller. Something that reached his eyes and changed the whole architecture of his face and made him look briefly and entirely like the person he was before 20 years of careful armor. It lasted only a moment, but it was real. He left to make his calls. She stood in the kitchen and breathed. Then she called Dana back. I have some things to tell you, she said. It's going to take a while. I have nowhere to be, Dana said immediately. I called in. I told them I had a family emergency. You don't have a family emergency. My best friend has been living in a Mafia Boss's house for 3 days and just helped bring down a 30-year criminal empire using her dead father's secret documents. I have absolutely a family emergency. A pause. Start from the beginning. Amelia almost laughed. The beginning was a burning car. Start there, she told her. All of it, Lucas's hand against the cracked glass, the cold rain, the CPR on wet pavement, the black SUVs arriving in silence, the box on her father's closet shelf, the sealed envelope with the red wax, Catherine Walsh across the table, Alexander's voice at 2 a.m. saying, "Will you stay?" She told it in the order it happened, without embellishment, because the truth was already more than enough. Dana was quiet through most of it. When Amelia finished, Dana said, "Your father left you a weapon,
Yes.
and you used it."
Yes. And now?
Amelia looked out the window at the city her father had worked in for 30 years, that he had seen clearly enough to document it, that Victor Crane had treated as a personal resource for decades. The city that was this morning, waking up to the news of an indictment it hadn't seen coming. Now I stay, she said, and we build something better. Dana was quiet for a moment. Are you happy? The question surprised her. Not because it was unexpected, but because she realized she had an actual answer. I'm not finished yet, she said, but I'm getting there. The secondary arrests happened the following afternoon. Walsh called Amelia, directly a courtesy she had not expected, and which told her something about how Walsh regarded what had happened in that neutral office above the law firm. 6 men connected to Crane's network were taken into custody. 2 of them were city officials whose names had appeared in her father's documentation. A third was a financial officer at a bank that had processed Crane's transactions for 15 years. Thomas Reeves, who had provided his statement in exchange for a reduced charge and the knowledge that he was safer in federal custody than anywhere Alexander Romano could reach him, was processed separately and quietly. The machine that Crane had built carefully, over decades with the patience of a man who understood that power was constructed slowly or not at all, dismantled in a single afternoon. Alexander told her that evening. He found her in the room she had come to think of as hers, sitting on the edge of the bed, her father's reading glasses in her hand, which had become a habit she had stopped examining. He stood in the doorway and delivered the information with the economy of a man who had learned to say important things simply. It's done, he said. She looked at him. Walsh confirmed the last arrest 20 minutes ago. The financial records are in federal hands. The shell companies are frozen. Crane's legal team filed 3 motions this morning and lost all 3. He paused. Your father's documentation was the foundation of every charge. Walsh used it in the arrest affidavit. She made sure of that. Amelia looked down at the glasses in her hands. She turned them over once. Twice. He wanted to fix something, she said. He made a mistake and spent 2 years trying to fix it. He didn't get to see whether it worked. He fixed it, Alexander said. You can't know that. He documented everything needed to end something that hurt people for 30 years. He kept it safe until someone who could use it found it. He chose you to hold it because he trusted your judgment and your courage. A pause. He fixed it. He just needed you to finish it. She sat with that. She had been carrying grief for her father for 4 years, not the loud grief that demanded attention, but the quiet kind. The kind that lived in the corners of ordinary days and surfaced unexpectedly in the sound of certain songs or the smell of certain things. The grief of someone who had lost a parent to a cause she hadn't understood. She understood it now. She pressed the glasses to her chest for one moment. Then she set them on the nightstand with the careful deliberateness of someone placing something valuable in the exact right location. Okay, she said. Alexander looked at her. Okay, she said again. Let's talk about the foundation. Something in his face shifted the particular quality of a man who had spent his life in rooms where people wanted things from him, encountering for the first time someone who had something to give. He came in and sat in the chair across from her, and they talked for 2 hours. She told him what the emergency room at St. Matthew's actually needed, not what the brochures said, but what the staff talked about in the break room at midnight. Equipment that was 5 years past replacement. A pediatric specialist consultation program that had been cut for budget reasons. A social work team that was 1 person where it should have been 6. She told him what she'd seen in 9 years of watching people fall through gaps, insurance gaps, access gaps, geographic gaps. The gaps that existed specifically where the city had decided certain neighborhoods did not require the same standard of care as others. He listened the way he had listened to everything she told him completely, without interrupting, without performing interest, with the actual focused attention of a man who had decided this mattered and was treating it accordingly. He asked questions that surprised her, not the questions of someone performing due diligence, but the questions of someone genuinely working to understand about the difference between funding programs and funding people, about how medical institutions made decisions about resource allocation, about what she had watched work and what she had watched fail. By the time they finished, the house was quiet, and the night was moving toward morning. One condition, she said. He raised an eyebrow. I stay on the floor at St. Matthew's, part-time at minimum. I'm not becoming an administrator who has forgotten what the work actually feels like. She looked at him. The foundation needs to be run by someone who still gets their hands dirty. Otherwise, it becomes what every other wealthy charitable foundation becomes, a performance of care rather than the thing itself. Agreed, he said immediately. You didn't even hesitate. It was the correct condition. I was not going to argue with a correct condition. She looked at him. You're different, she said. From what? From what I expected. From the first night. She thought about how to say it accurately. The man on that street who told his bodyguard to bring me, who studied me like I might be a threat, that man was entirely armor. Nothing exposed. Nothing uncertain. She paused. That man is still in the room. But there's more room now for the other one. Alexander was quiet for a moment. Lucas told me something this morning, he said. What? He told me that you told him being scared doesn't mean you stop. It means you pay attention. A pause. He said he thought I should know that. Because he thinks I forget sometimes that it's allowed to be both scared and still going. She stared at him. He said that? He is 8 years old and he is, without question, the most perceptive person I have ever known. Something warm and complex moved through his voice. He also said that you have a good real laugh and that he thinks you should use it more. Her throat tightened in the way she had learned, meant she was trying not to feel something that deserved to be felt. She let herself feel it. He's right, she said. About all of it. Alexander looked at her with an expression she had never seen on his face before. Not controlled, not assessed, not performed. Open, genuinely, fully open in the way that people were open when they had run out of reasons to protect themselves from the truth. I did not know, he said. When I walked toward that crash 2 nights ago, I did not know that the woman holding my son was going to change the shape of everything. He paused. I am not a man who is accustomed to being surprised. I have spent my entire life building structures specifically designed to prevent surprise. Another pause. Longer. You surprised me. Is that a complaint? It is the opposite of a complaint. She looked at him. Good, she said. 3 weeks later, Victor Crane entered a federal courtroom and was arraigned on 17 counts. He looked smaller than his photographs, the particular diminishment of powerful men when power left them. He did not look at the gallery. He stood very still and listened to the charges and answered when required and was led away. Walsh called Amelia from the courthouse steps. Your father's name will be in the record, she said, as the originating source of the core documentary evidence. It will be part of the public record of this case. A pause. History will know that Daniel Carter did this. Amelia stood in the hallway outside Lucas's school. She had brought him back on the day Alexander had promised, and Mrs. Chen had indeed assigned the full complement of makeup work without negotiation, and she had been waiting to take him home, and she heard Walsh's words and felt something loosen in her chest that had been tight for 4 years. Thank you, she said, for making sure of that. Thank you, Walsh said, for finishing what he started. Lucas came out of the school building at 3:15 with his backpack and a significant quantity of makeup work, and the expression of a child who had survived an ordeal and intended to eat something immediately. He saw Amelia and his face did the thing it always did, the quick bright shift, the particular relief of someone who had decided to trust a person and kept being right about that decision. Did it happen, he said. Papa texted, but he uses short words when it's important. Yes, she said, it happened. Lucas nodded seriously. He hitched his backpack up. Good, he said. Then can we get food on the way home? She laughed. The real laugh, full and unguarded and entirely her own. Lucas grinned because he had predicted it and was pleased with himself. Yes, she said. We can get food. 6 months after a nurse ran toward a burning vehicle on a rain-soaked New York street and pulled a child out of the fire and changed the direction of everything, the Romano Foundation relaunched. The announcement was made at a press conference held at St. Matthew's Hospital, specifically, in the lobby of the newly funded pediatric wing, which had received its first significant renovation in 11 years. Amelia stood at the podium and spoke about her father and about what emergency medicine actually needed versus what it usually received, and about the gap between charitable intention and charitable impact. She spoke without notes, the way she had learned to speak directly, honestly, without performance. Alexander stood in the back of the room. He did not speak. He had been offered the podium and declined it, on the grounds that the foundation was not about him, and that the person most qualified to explain what it was and why it mattered was the person who had shaped it. He stood in the back and watched Amelia at the podium, and his face held the expression that Lucas had told her about once, the real one, the one he kept for the things that actually reached him. She saw him from the podium. She held his gaze for exactly 1 second. Then she finished what she was saying, because she had always been a woman who finished things. The pediatric wing treated its first patients that same afternoon. Amelia was there for the first hour, not in her administrative capacity, but in scrubs, with her kit, doing what she had done for 9 years. She checked vitals and answered parents' questions and sat on the edge of a bed next to a frightened 10-year-old and explained what was happening with the honest clarity she had always given to children. When she came out of the room, Alexander was in the hallway. He had not been expected. He had driven himself, which Marcus had apparently found deeply alarming, and had communicated by text to Amelia 3 times during the preceding hour. He was in a jacket but no tie, his hands in his pockets, standing in a hospital hallway with the slightly uncertain quality of a man who was in a place he had no professional reason to be in and had come anyway. "You didn't need to come," she said. "I know. It was just a first afternoon." "I know that too." She looked at him. "How's Lucas?" "Home with Marcus, who is treating this assignment with more anxiety than any of the genuinely dangerous situations he has managed in 12 years of employment." A pause. "Lucas asked me to give you this." He produced a folded piece of paper. She unfolded it. It was a drawing, careful, detailed, clearly worked on with significant effort. 2 figures, one tall with dark hair, one slightly shorter with lighter hair. Between them, a smaller figure. Underneath, in Lucas's deliberate block printing, "Family is the people who run towards you instead of away." She looked at it for a long moment. She looked at Alexander. "He made that himself?" she said. "This morning. He was very particular about the details." A pause. "He wanted the colors correct." She folded it back along its original lines and put it in the pocket of her scrubs, in the same pocket where she had kept her father's reading glasses for 3 weeks. "He's extraordinary," she said. "Yes. Like his father." Alexander looked at her. "Do not start comparing me to an 8-year-old, he said. I said like. Not the same. She held his gaze. "He has your instincts. Your perception. Your loyalty." A pause. "And he has an openness that you spent 20 years covering over." He held on to it. "Maybe that's the best of both of you." The hallway was busy around them, nurses moving, a cart being wheeled, someone on a phone, the ordinary productive noise of a place doing necessary work. Alexander Romano stood in the middle of all of it, which was exactly the kind of place he had never been before, and he looked at the woman in front of him. And he said nothing for a long moment because what he was feeling did not require words to be true. "Then come home when you're done," he said, not a command. Not a request. A simple statement of a fact that had become true without either of them announcing it, that there was a home now, and she was part of it. "I'll be a few hours," she said. "I know. Lucas will be awake regardless. He has opinions about the makeup work that he wants to share with someone who will take them seriously. Mrs. Chen doesn't negotiate, and yet he keeps trying." Something moved in his face. "He says you told him that not stopping is the point. That you try because you try, not because you're certain of the outcome." She paused. "I did say that," she said. "He says it applies to the makeup work." That is an impressive piece of reasoning from an 8-year-old. "He is his mother's son," Alexander said. And then, quietly, with a weight behind it that held all the complexity of a man who had loved someone and lost her, spent years building walls around that loss, "and I think she would have liked you very much." Amelia let that settle. "I'll be home by 8, she said. He nodded. He turned to go, and she turned back to the ward, and the hospital moved around her with its ordinary urgency and its necessary noise, and she walked forward into it the way she had always walked forward into everything, without stopping, without looking for guarantees, with the absolute certainty that the work was worth doing, and that the doing was its own answer. She did not know every shape of what came next. She did not know what Alexander's organization would look like in 5 years, or what the foundation would become, or how Lucas's face would change as he grew into the man she could already see forming in the child he was. She did not know what her father would have said if he had seen this, if he had known, in those last careful months of documentation and fear, that the daughter he trusted with his most important truth would stand in a hospital he had helped fund and look at a man who had chosen to become better than he was. She did not know all of it, but she knew this: a woman with nothing to gain had run toward a fire on a rainy night and pulled a child from the burning. And the child had been a beginning, and the father had been a choice. And the truth in the box had been a weapon her father spent his last years forging, and she had picked it up and used it, and his name was in the record now, permanent and public and real. And the city that Victor Crane had treated as his personal empire for 30 years was already becoming something different, one funded wing, one honest accounting, one day at a time, because one woman had refused to walk away when walking away would have been so much easier. That was not a fairy tale. That was not a story about a powerless woman saved by a powerful man. That was the story of a nurse who already knew what she was worth, who ran toward every fire she encountered without waiting for permission, who finished what her father started and built something new from what was left, and who chose, with full knowledge of what the choice cost and what it meant, to stand beside a man who was trying to become more than what he had been. She chose it, and it was the truest thing she had ever done. Some people spend their whole lives waiting to be rescued. Amelia Carter had never been that kind of person. She was the kind who did the rescuing. And in the end, without meaning to, without asking for it, without knowing it was happening until it already had, she rescued them all.